Hello and welcome to the next episode in my tutorial series Subtractive Synthesis on various synthesizers. So far we've covered all the major sections of a synthesizer and we've already gone back and revisited the oscillator section. This synthesizer, the Novation Peak, has a relatively complex oscillator section and we were able to achieve a fairly interesting tone without touching the filter or touching the effects. In this episode, what we're going to do is focus a little bit more on the modulation matrix. The modulation matrix is a way that we can connect up the modulation sources available to us to various destinations to allow for more animation or movement in our sound. So let's get an init patch and let's listen to where we're starting. Okay, so what exactly do we want to do? Why would we want to animate? Well, firstly, let's listen to what we have. We have a relatively clean, plain tone, but let's introduce an animation, a very simple one. We're going to introduce a triangle wave LFO, and it is going to adjust the wave shape of the saw wave. So we've already added some more interest here. Let's listen to that same movement applied to different wave types. Sine. Triangle. Saw. Square. Or rather pulse. I think that's already pretty interesting. So this has given us something of a basic tone that we can start working with. What I would like to do is, before moving into more complicated modulations, I'd like to bring in another tone that we can work with and use a pair of tones together. So I'm going to turn down oscillator 1, turn up oscillator 2. In that case, we were just using the pulse wave. What I'm going to use now is the triangle wave, and I'm going to, instead of animating it with the same oscillator, the same LFO, I'm going to animate it with a second LFO. This LFO is going to run at a slightly different rate, so the modulation is not going to be in sync. There is no panel control for LFO2, so I'm going to move to the modulation matrix, and to judge the amount of shape modulation that I would like, oscillator 2 shape, I'm just going to I listened to how far that moved, and that will be the maximum extent of the movement. Direct means unity modulation. In other words, just apply it at the level that I set in intensity. So now I'm going to pick LFO2, bipolar. Bipolar means that it will modulate both up and down. Maybe the intensity is a little bit much. I quite like the sound. Let me listen to the ring modulated combination of those two. Let me listen to each one individually. So what I might do is experiment with oscillator 1 down an octave. So you can hear that we've actually got a pretty full sound there, so I know already that we're going to have to be figuring out how we're going to tame some of that sound in the filter section. But what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about modulations. So let's think about how we might like to modulate this sound. Well, firstly, I think at the moment their envelope is not very interesting. There's a default routing between the amplitude envelope and the amplitude, so let's make this into a pad. So what do I think of as a pad? I think a pad has a soft attack. think a pad has a long decay. I think that's interesting. I think I might like to detune both of these oscillators very slightly, so I'm going to use the fine tune. So I think the detune gives us a little bit more animation. In addition to that detune, what I'm going to do is use diverge. What diverge does is it means that the pitches of the oscillators will diverge from true pitch over time, and drift means that the absolute tuning is going to shift per time over time. So I'm going to set both of these to some non-zero amount. There's another of these parameters in the voice menu called filter diverge. This will mean that each voice will have a slightly different value for the filter cutoff when we introduce it. So let's try. I think we already have a quite interesting sound going on, and we just have those regular animations going. Let's think about how we can shape this a little bit more. So firstly, the obvious way to shape is going to be to add some filter movement. So how would we like the filter to move here? I like a 12 dB filter for polyphonic sounds. So I'm going to be using an envelope to modulate the filter. So what I've done here is my envelope is going to open the filter. So I'm listening, how closed would I ever want the filter to be? So that's probably as closed as I would like it to be. So now mod envelope 1 I'm going to shape to give us some filter movement. I'm going to pick, I'm looking at the shape of that envelope. Now let's bring some of it in. So one thing I'm already thinking of here is I would like some more expression from a velocity perspective. So there are two ways I can achieve that. First, I can have amplitude envelope velocity. So what this means is the amplitude envelope has a certain shape which is not affected by this, but the entire signal will be scaled down based on the velocity. So if I turn this way up, so you see when I press the key lightly, you can hardly hear anything. When I press the key hard, you hear full volume. That's a bit excessive, so I'm going to turn that down a bit. Additionally, I can do the same effect on the modulation envelope. So I think that gives us a bit of shape here, but I'm interested in, is it possible to change the attack of the sound with the velocity as well? So not just the amount of modulation that we have here, but the amount of attack that we get. So let's go into the modulation matrix. So what we can do is we have currently the amp envelope and we have the mod envelope. So let's look at amp envelope attack. Okay, so let's make that velocity sensitive. Let's do that a little more. And let's do the same to mod envelope 1. So mod envelope 1, attack. velocity sensitive. So let's try this out. Okay, so now you can hear when we strike the key harder, instead of having such a soft pad-like attack, we have a sharper attack. Maybe that's a little exaggerated, so I'm gonna decrease the amount that it happens. So we still have a slightly softer, rounded attack, but it's a little bit less intense. So let's think about other ways that we can provide expression for the sound here. So one of them, I think, is, let's listen to what resonance does. I think I'm just going to increase the resonance. Let's listen to overdrive. So I like what overdrive does, and I think maybe I'd like to bring that in with the mod wheel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another modulation matrix entry, and I'm going to start by just directly routing this. So I'm routing filter drive to the mod wheel. So I like the filter drive there. Maybe I'm going to bring it up even more. So what I might do is have the mod wheel also increase the resonance. So filter resonance with the mod wheel. I might have the mod wheel close down the filter a little bit again as well. So let's go to filter frequency. Mod wheel. So overall, I feel like even though I'm playing in the middle register of the keyboard, it sounds a bit deep. So what I'm going to do is bring Oscillator 1 up an octave and Oscillator 2 up an octave. So when I play down a register, we have that deep sound. I feel like in the high registers it's very, very bright. What I would like is for the filter to be a bit more closed. Now I could go in the mod matrix to do that, but I actually have a filter tracking control. Filter tracking adjusts to what extent the cutoff changes as we play up and down the keyboard. So if I turn this down, we can hear the sound is... We can hear we get less of that brightness in the high register. So I think this is working. I think I would like to have a bit of movement on the filter. Now I do have access to having LFO1 modulate the filter directly, but I feel like I'd like a more complex modulation here. So one of the things that I could do is, since I have two sources available to me for each modulation, I can have both modulation LFO1 and 2 applied simultaneously. This is effectively multiplying them by each other. So I could have LFO1 bipolar, so positive and negative values, multiplied by the value of LFO2. If I play that applied to pitch, you'll hear it sounds ridiculous, but So you can hear it's not just the direct oscillation, it has some secondary phasing happening because these two are not running at the same rates. These two oscillators. So let's route that to the filter cutoff. So filter frequency. It's a little bit strong, I'm going to turn it down a bit. I think it might be interesting if when this went down, the filter drive went up a little bit. So let's do that. So same modulation, LFO1 positive, bipolar, LFO2 unipolar, filter drive. So I'm going to pick a negative amount here. So I think that adds some interest here. I noted that we haven't actually used the second modulation envelope yet. So I'm going to try and think of a way in which it would make sense to use that. So let's get a second mod envelope. I might use it to modulate Oscillator 3 to do something. Currently we're not using Oscillator 3, so let me turn the other oscillators down for now. Oscillator 3. The other modulations are still in effect, but it's just one oscillator we're listening to here. Okay, so I like its overall sound. One thing that I could do is we have an amplitude envelope gating the entire sound, but I could adjust the mixer level of Oscillator 3 using mod envelope 2, and then mod envelope 2 would act like an amplitude envelope here. So let's say that I just pick some sort of shape, turn Oscillator 3 down, back to the mod matrix, mod envelope 2 to Oscillator 3 level. So I would like this also to be velocity sensitive, so now we've got mod envelope 2 multiplied by velocity. So let's bring the other sounds back. So So another thing that we have access to as a modulation is we can have the filter cutoff frequency modulated by Oscillator 3. This tends to add a lot of brightness. If I bring it right up, it'll probably be excessive. But one possibility that I have is I can have this again be I might have the mod wheel bring some of this modulation in. So let's see how much of it we want. This is going to be called Oscillator 3 to filter frequency. Sounds nice. So So let's think a little bit about the effects section now. I might like the mod wheel to bring in a little distortion, so let's do that. Let's say filter distortion. From the mod wheel. So you may note that one of the things I've done with the mod wheel here is I've got pretty extreme modulations on it. So in practice, probably, I wouldn't really be playing the mod wheel for this patch. I'd be listening and then leaving it. So what this means is I can have a patch which has a range of different parameters available to me. There's another way that I can do that, which is these animate parameters. So say for example, I like that noise. Let's do something to it. So I say I like that noise and I'd like to bring it in rhythmically. I could say noise level from, what's that one called? Animate 1. So I think the filter is a little bit close to hear that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have the filter frequency also open a bit. Also with Animate 1. So now I have a momentary switch which I can also latch. Say I decided I liked it, or so this is a pretty interesting parameter from an animation perspective, and if I'm driving from an external sequencer, I can also automate that. Finally, I'm going to go in and add some effects. In the effects section, you'll see the chorus is available as a chorus, a flanger, or another flanger. Let's try this other flanger and see how it sounds. Let's spread the voices a bit. Too wide. Interesting. Let's look at the delay. So what have we got? So we have an option for a very large time scale, giving extremely lo-fi delay. So let's listen to the lo-fi delay. let's have a look if there's anything interesting in the reverb. Okay, so let's try. So I've gone through a relatively broad design process here and hopefully illustrated that there are a whole slew of modulation routings that I can make. I haven't actually used either of the global LFOs, nor have I done any modulation on the effect settings themselves, but hopefully you can hear that I have a sound which is quite expressive, a sound which has a lot of variation based on velocity, a sound which has some broad variation available for the mod wheel. In addition to the modulation sources that I've mentioned, it's actually also possible to use the pitch bend wheel as a modulation source. So I can adjust modulation based on positive or negative deflection of the wheel. So that would allow me to, for example, say that I don't actually want any pitch change from any of my oscillators with a pitch bend wheel. So it no longer adjusts the pitch, but I could go in the modulation matrix and I could use, if I can find it, there you go, bend wheel plus, bend wheel minus. So I have additional capabilities and additional modulation sources. I also haven't used an expression pedal. So if I wanted to make an extremely expressive sound, I have access to pitch bend modulation, mod wheel modulation, velocity modulation. I haven't used aftertouch modulation. This also supports polyphonic aftertouch. I've only used one of the animate buttons. So there are a whole range of additional modulation sources. There are a whole range of modulation destinations, some of which I hope I've illustrated. So in any case, I hope what I've demonstrated here is that modulation routings are the way to extract the maximum power of the features and modulation sources of your synthesizer. If you limit yourself to the panel modulation routings, you're limiting the degree to which you can design and customize the sound the way that you would like to customize it. The sound that I've designed today possibly isn't to your taste, possibly isn't even the sound that I set out to design, but it was an interesting, I hope, excursion through the mod matrix, through the modulation sources, and through the synthesizer as a whole. So thank you very much for watching, as always. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope you'll continue to join me for some more videos, but in any case, thank you and goodbye.